The present is now. This is all we have. All we have is the present. Yesterday is but a low-resolution memory. Tomorrow cannot be predicted or expected. This present moment is where we live our lives 1 second at a time. What better way to immortalize our lives than with photography? Thanks again for coming, everyone. And I want to start by thanking Chris and his team here for thinking that I'm worthy to come over here and speak to you fine people about my work. If you don't know, my name is Shane Balkowitsch. I was an oncology nurse, and I was a business person, and then I fell in love with wet plate collodion photography. I had never owned a camera in my life. On October 4th, 2012, when I took my first glass plate, I had never read a book on photography. I never took a class on photography. I didn't have a mentor in photography. It was just me with some chemistry and a wood camera in my back warehouse. And this photograph was actually not my first photograph, but it was my first self-portrait taken one day after my first wet plate. So on October 5th, 2012, I took this portrait of myself. One of the big questions that I get asked all the time is, well, how did you get started? That's what everyone asks me, and I have the same canned response all of the time. I was actually, as a non-photographer, on Facebook, and this image to the right came up on my screen. And I keep that image to remind me where I started. I didn't know what I was looking at the time, and I like to joke that I wish it was some kind of beautiful landscape or some beautiful nude or something that grabbed me by the throat and dragged me down this path to follow photography, but it wasn't. It was this out-of-focus shot of a vintage motorcycle with some out-of-focus people behind it. The man, Paul DeLoreans, was the man who is, I saw this photograph with it as well. I saw him mixing some chemistry and stuff, and that all seemed fantastic. And so I messaged Paul, and I said, Paul, what is that? And he says, well, it's wet plate collodion. And I said, well, I would just love to do that. And I made this comment without ever even having a camera at the time. So Paul says to me, well, are you a photographer, Shane? And I said, no, Paul, I don't even own a camera. And he says, well, there's no way a non-photographer will ever teach himself wet plate collodion. And within 45 days of that conversation, I made my very first photograph. He wasn't being mean, he was just being very honest. He says, Shane, I've been a photographer for 25 years, and I can't figure this out. There's no way a non-photographer will ever figure it out. So I knew what I was going to chase. So I found John Coffer's The Doer's Guide, which is a manual that I sat on my couch with a highlighter and highlighted notes, and I started taking notes and figuring out how. So John introduced wet plate to the world back in the 1980s, and it was his manual that allowed me to sit on my couch and to teach myself this process. So me and John have been following each other for years, and last year I was able to go to his jamboree for the first time and meet the man. It was rather inspirational. Here John is in 1979, traveling 11,000 miles back and forth across the United States with his buggy and his mule called, I'm trying to think of the name of his mule. I can't think of it right now. But he was making wet plates on the road, and that's the man who gave me the instructions. So here I am last year at John Coffer. That's John Coffer there in the straw hat, me to the right at his jamboree. He holds this every year. In fact, today, as I speak with you people, the jamboree is in session in upstate New York. There's about 40 to 50 wet plate artists together. This weekend, I will be going. Ray Spence is in the room. He's organizing the UK Collodion weekend. I'll be going to that as well. So there's these different Collodion weekends throughout the world that we attend. But that's when I got to meet John, and this is his group plate from last year. The portrait I took of Mr. Coffer, the master of tintypes, and the portrait he took of me, the pupil, and I have in my hands the Doer's Guide that I learned the process from. This is in my makeshift studio back in 2012. I had never been in a darkroom before. So I had to figure out what happens in a darkroom and what equipment is in a darkroom and what do these red lights mean and all of these things. And I was just a guy with his camera trying to make images of my family one after a time, one image after another. So humble beginnings, no windows in that studio. The other funny thing about this studio for you photographers in the room, I didn't have a separate darkroom. So when my sitter was in the chair waiting to get their picture taken, in order to load the plate, I had to turn all the lights off in the entire back room. So my sitters were sitting in the dark while I was making the plates, putting the plates into the plate holder. Not to get too much into history today, but the daguerreotype, we have to tip our hat to the Frenchman, Louis Daguerre, for inventing the daguerreotype. This was around 1838, so there was a previous photographic process, and there were some other print processes as well, but the daguerreotype, we have to pay homage to him for bringing that to the world. What they had with the daguerreotype, if some of you aren't familiar with it, they would take a piece of copper, they would high polish it to a mirror-like finish, they would use some mercury, heat it up, and they would get these images, these mirror-like images to come to life. There were some dangers involved. Mercury is very, very dangerous, heavy metal poisoning. So you guys know about Mad Hatter's disease. Everyone thinks that Disney character that jumps around and is all funny. It's really not, he's not a funny character. He's actually dying from Mad Hatter's disease because he was breathing the mercury vapor. So it was a very dangerous proposition, and many young photographers lost their lives, lost their brains before they lost their lives to mercury poisoning making daguerreotypes. And then we're going to go into my process. So in 1851, Frederick Scott Archer invented the wet plate collodion process. It was an easier process to do than the daguerreotypes. It wasn't quite as dangerous, and he gave this to the world. And so in the scientific journal called The Chemist in 1851, he explained this process and gave what I practice to the world. So all of us wet plate artists, and there's quite a few of us here in this room, we all follow his footsteps with this process. Incidentally, this portrait is at the V&A Museum. It used to be at the Royal Photographic Society, and we only know of 2 photographs of the man. There I talk a little bit about the chemistry. So there's 2 important chemical solutions of the wet plate collodion photography. Salted collodion, which is my bottle there on the left, collodion had a medical application. So if I was a doctor on the plains or something, or during the Civil War, and someone got cut in the arm or something like that, I would have some ether with me because we use ether to put people unconscious. So you would, if we had to do surgery on people, we'd have them breathe ether and they'd go unconscious and we'd do surgery. So I'd have ether as a doctor, then I'd go to my gunsmith and get some gun cotton, some cellulose, and I'd shove it in the bottle of ether and I'd mix it around and I would make myself collodion. Collodion had this medical application, so the person that had the open wound, I could just pour the collodion in the wound and hold it shut, and I could seal the wound shut. It was like chemical stitches in the Victorian era. So Frederick Scott Archer knew about this magical glue, and his big invention was he figured out there's an affinity, there's an attraction of silver molecules to salts, in this case bromide salts that I use, where the silver jumps out of a silver nitrate bath and makes a photosensitive plate. Silver nitrate is the other solution that we use commonly in wet plates. So we pour the collodion on the plate and then we immerse it for 3 minutes in the silver nitrate. Anyone know how silver nitrate's made? Let's say, for instance, you have a silver ring or something. I would get some nitric acid, a little cup of nitric acid. I take, if your ring's pure silver, I take it off his finger. The nitric acid looks like water. It's clear. It's a clear liquid. Okay, you can't just discern that from water. I drop this gentleman's silver ring into the nitric acid. Some yellow fumes would come off the top of that for a couple minutes as the chemical reaction took place, but his ring would disappear and the liquid would stay clear, which is rather miraculous for me. It's very strange that I could take a piece of metal and convert it into this silver nitrate. It's a silver nitrate that we put on the plates, and in the development process, we turn that silver molecules back into the metal silver. So we have to turn it out of the metal silver and then back into the metal silver on the actual plate. Talks a little bit about the collodion and the wound dressings. They used to also use it in makeup and stage, wart treatment, electroid, adhesion, optics cleaning, and all kinds of other photographic applications. And silver nitrate, as a nurse, I'm also an oncology nurse by trade, we would instill silver nitrate into the eyes of infants that have mothers with gonorrhea, and it would stop the babies from being blind. So it was a very, very important reagent. I came in yesterday and I thought, well, I need to visit the grave of Frederick Scott Archer, which is just in London here at the Kensal Green Cemetery. And I brought a bottle of a little vial of my collodion from my studio, and I set it on the grave of Frederick Scott Archer in a way of giving him honor for bringing me, introducing me and giving me this process. Here's a signed print by Mr. Archer in 1851, one of the first images demonstrating the process. There's two attributes that a wet plate that are fascinating for myself. The first one is the archivability. I have a pure silver coin in my pocket here. I brought it all the way from the United States. Okay, so this is a pure silver coin. If I toss it on the floor and I come back 500 years from now and look at that, what's on the floor? A silver coin. And that's why these images to the right over here of these Native Americans, they're made out of pure silver. And that's why these images are completely archival. And that's why Chris does not have to do much to get these 200, 300, 400, 100 years into the future. They're completely archival. Silver does not degrade. If you make images out of paints and pigments, you could just go to the Louvre and take a look at some of those paintings on the wall, right? You take a really good close inspection, they're all cracking and peeling and fading, and a lot of curation work has to go into making sure you can get those into the future. That's not really the case with the wet plate collodion photograph. It's completely archival once it's created and if it's properly varnished. So I just love that about, and that's why it's a perfect medium for making historical plates. The other fascinating thing about wet plating is the resolution. Any idea how many molecules of silver at the tip of my finger so you can view it with the human eye? If I could pipette 1 molecule, 2 molecules, 3 molecules, 4 molecules, 5 molecules, what number do I get to? And you say, oh, I can see it for the first time. Any ideas? Guesses? Thousands? I heard thousands. What? Millions? 2 billion. 2 billion molecules of silver at the tip of my finger for you to say, oh, I can see it for the first time. So I'm writing, okay, in those molecules of silver. So all of my images, you can take these right now. We're at the University of Oxford. They have a microscope here somewhere, right, at the university, I'm sure? Okay? I'm sure they do. We can take those plates and put it under the most high-powered microscope that Oxford has, and you can't get to the pixel or grain that makes up that image. Okay? That's not the case for like film photography. We all know that even just with a magnifying glass and even with the naked eye sometimes, you can see the grain of different photographic processes. With the wet plate process, you can't. You need an electron microscope, and I'm not sure if Oxford has one of those. If not, get on that, Chris. An electron microscope at 10,000 power, and you can start seeing the clumping of the silvers. So not only are these images that I made over here going to last out any other photograph ever taken of these human beings, those are the most high-resolution photographs man has ever created, and they will never have a more high-resolution photograph ever taken of them in their lives. We abandoned this in 1885. For why? For something more convenient, a little cheaper. You know, I didn't have to use that darn dark room right away, that kind of thing. So it wasn't a good enough reason to abandon the most beautiful photographic process man has ever invented. Here I'm just reiterating some of what we talked about. You can about imagine as you're sitting there on your couch trying to figure out, oh, I've got to pour this elixir of collodion onto my plate, and this is the diagrams that I was working from. So, you know, we're so lucky. Back in the 1980s, it was thought that there was only 6 wet plate artists in the world in the 1980s, right around John Coffer's time when he brought this back. So we think there's about 1,000 of us now in the world. There's going to be Ray, how many people are going to be at the UK thing? 21 wet platers at the castle this weekend. So there's about 1,000 of us in the world. But it gives you a little bit of an idea of what the technique that had to make it from 1851 into present day in order for me to understand this. Here's a diagram of a historical portable darkroom with the equipment. And yes, everything on this list, I need every bit of this on my list. Nowadays, we just walk around with these things, right? We all have a camera, we snap pictures. Doesn't cost us anything. If we don't like it, we delete it. We add filters to it, all these things. In order to make a wet plate, I need every stinking bit of this. Here's a photograph I took of Jordan Peterson. He had spoke here on February 23rd of this year. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of. So Mr. Peterson's probably the most famous psychologist in the world today, probably in the last 50 years. And I had the opportunity, his daughter contacted me about taking his wet plates. I drove 600 miles to Minneapolis and had 2 hours alone in the room with Dr. Peterson and was able to make this portrait. On the left, before I left to see the good doctor, this was my equipment that had to fit into my car in order to go get the images. I talked a little bit about why did they abandon wet plate in the 1885, right around there, and a lot of these dates are general dates, but understand, by 1851 invented, by 1885 this process fell out of favor because what happened is that you didn't need to have the darkroom with you. You could actually take pictures and you could develop them later. The dry plate process came about and the wet plate process was replaced because it was more convenient for the photographers. I have to, once I pour that collodion onto the plate, I have probably 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the humidity and the heat of that day, to get that plate sensitized and through the entire system. With the dry plate, you could just buy it from Kodak Eastman, load it in your camera, take your picture, put it away, take a picture, put it away, take a picture, put it away, and weeks later you could go and develop it. That's not the case with the wet plate. I have to develop, I have to fix, we got to rinse, we got to do all these things to get these things finalized, and we have to do it within about 10 minutes. Here's a picture of me with Greta Thunberg, the Swedish environmentalist, in the back of my Hummer. Here's a picture of me, what it looks like when I go into my darkroom. So these photographers had these portable darkrooms. Here's Roger Fenton's rolling darkroom from 1855. So back in 2014, I thought I would take a picture of me sitting on my rolling darkroom, and so I worked in that first, you saw that first photograph of me in that first studio, very humble studio. And then I decided that, that I'm onto something here, that this really speaks to me, that maybe this is the reason I was put here on earth, is to make these plates. And at the time, I made the decision that I was going to build my own bespoke natural light photography studio. And this is Nostalgic Glass Wet Plate Studio. It's in my backyard. This is the exterior, and this is an interior panoramic view. It's the first built from the ground up, purposefully built natural light photography studio in the United States in 125 years. You'd have to be a complete idiot to build a natural light photography studio in 2017. This is the fixer step, where I'm putting the plate in the fixer. And the image clears and the image appears. Oh my goodness. And it's the part of the process that we just adore. You're going to see the response. Look at the draping. You guys got the draping. Yeah. She had to lay on her back for 4 hours in order for me. It took us 4 hours like that in order for me to get to that plate there. I also do some creative work, so channeling Eve Carrere, spirit photography. So here is the image on the left, and then here is us. This is the first time I started someone on fire in my studio. So we had to do that while the lens was off the camera, and we had to do that real time. So I found some her dress actually catches on fire. You're going to see me come running in and going, that's not good. I don't think I should start her on fire today. We dropped the camera, but she was fine, and we got the resulting plate. So it was very popular to have this. They were fooling people. But people were also paying to see this. They were thinking that their loved ones were being touched, or that they were able to touch the spirit world. So this kind of effect was used quite a bit back in the Victorian era. So to get to where I started, I found out about Orlando Scott Goff in a history book. And Orlando Scott Goff, this is in my hometown of Bismarck, North Dakota. So this is in Main Street in Bismarck, North Dakota. Orlando Scott Goff here with his wife, their dog, and their young baby. That's his store behind. You can see the prints. Orlando Scott Goff was a frontier photographer in Bismarck. And what he is known for is this. On July 31st, 1871 in Bismarck, North Dakota, he took this photograph of Sitting Bull, the very, very famous Native American. So famous that you guys know who he is, right? Over here and across the pond. Okay, that's pretty famous. This is not just a photograph of Sitting Bull, it's the first ever photograph of Sitting Bull. And so when I found out about this, I decided that I found out from the Smithsonian that there was a gentleman by the name of Ernie LaPointe, and he was the great-grandson of Sitting Bull, that he lived in Leeds, South Dakota. So I found him in the phone book. I called him on the phone. I remember this distinctly. He answered on the first ring. I said, Mr. LaPointe, I'm Shane Balkowitsch. I'm making wet plates in Bismarck, North Dakota. Your great-grandfather had his wet plate taken in Bismarck 135 years ago. Will you come in? He said, I'll be there within a week. And he came in, and this is what we made on the left. This is called Eternal Field. And this is a digital iPhone shot of it, which I always love the juxtaposition. Chris and I were talking about that over lunch, the juxtaposition of reality versus what the process gives us. Ernie jokingly tells this story of, see the car behind him? So that's a freeway. This is a freeway behind him here. And he remembers hearing the cars, and he said, Shane, I didn't think you knew what you were doing, because these cars were driving and these big trucks were driving behind me, and you were taking these pictures of me. There's no way that this is ever going to turn out. But Mr. LaPointe is a very dear friend of mine to this day. He was not aware that this process is so slow that the moving cars would not register in the plate. This plate's very important to me because this is the first plate that I ever got into any museum. So the State Historical Society of North Dakota, my home state, identified that a wet plate of Ernie LaPointe, the great-grandson of Sitting Bull, 135 years after Sitting Bull's portrait was taken in Bismarck, was historically significant. So all other plates at all other 104 museums that I have plates at follow behind this plate here. Here's a picture of Ernie standing in my studio, and here's another plate that went to the South Dakota State Historical Society. Another plate of Ernie, and him always, every time he's with me, he's giving me words of advice. And when the great-grandson of Sitting Bull has words of advice, I just recommend you opening your ears. I am 888 portraits as of today, 884 portraits as of today, completed for my goal of 1,000 Native American portraits. So the series was going to be 10 plates. I took Ernie's plate, I took Dakota Goodhouse's plate, and I was thinking, boy, if I could find 8 more Native Americans, I would really have something here. Then I got to 10, and I said, okay, we'll do 50. And then I got to 50, and I said, well, we'll do 100. Then I got to 100, I said, screw it, we're going to go for 1,000. And I knew darn well that I was pushing myself about 15 years out into the future, but that was a promise that I made to my Native American friends. So here's the 5 plates today that I'm donating to Pitt Rivers Gourd woman. She was actually Miss Native American in 1954. And she walked in, I just took her plate in June of this year, 1954. Keith Bear, renowned flute maker. So he not only plays the flute, but he makes flutes, and Native Americans all over the country play the instruments that he makes. Yellow Fox woman. It's kind of funny here is that Yellow Fox woman, she has some white roses, but she had some yellow roses. Colors translate differently in wet plates. So reds, if you have a red shirt on, it's going to be a black shirt. And if you have a blue shirt on, it's going to turn white. So she's actually holding red flowers there, but they turned black when I did the exposure. Beautiful Evening Star woman, Margaret Yellowbird. This woman here, when I was first making probably less than 10 plates, Margaret would come into the studio and she would bring friends, and then she would tell other Native Americans, you can trust this man, you can trust this man. And she did that for some years, and then eventually I didn't need her to do that for me anymore. And I've been independent, but without her friendship and her trust so many years ago, she would help me make sure that all the regalia was in the right order and everything looked good. She's very, very instrumental in my work, and I can't have a talk here about my Native American series without honoring her. Mr. Thunder. I want to talk a little bit really quickly about a cultural appropriation in the digital age. Here's a digital photograph of a non-Native American woman dressed in some kind of regalia that doesn't exist in the real world. This image here had 788 likes in one day on this photographic group. There's 170,000 members in this photographic group, and that image got 788 likes in one day. I posted this original ambrotype of an original Native American, a real Native American woman in a historic process, and I got 4 likes in a month. I don't know what that says about us in society, but I think it's a problem. Any one of you that know me in this, know who I am, they know that I've been a very strong voice against artificial intelligence when it comes to making imagery. I have no problem, I'm an oncology nurse, I explained, I have no problem with AI, solving cancer treatments, or AI cleaning my toilets. I have no problem with those things. I do have a problem with artificial intelligence making these fake images. None of these people on this screen, and they're trying to be ambrotypes here, none of these people ever existed. And the problem is for Chris and his team and the other people in this world that care about history in the future, trying to discern what was real and what was not, and how this can cloud real history. I've written 5 articles for Petapixel. AI imagery is not photography, and it never will be. Unless you're using light, it's not a photograph, okay? And AI does not use light. AI imagery may destroy history as we know it. I love this tintype of the man with the laptop or this lady with the cell phone. It's all fun and laughs now, right? But you don't know 150 years from now. These images get out into the wild, right? They end up on Google, and people are going to have to make determinations of whether or not these things are real or not. And it's just not something we need to get behind. AI isn't corrupting the internet as we know it. My daughters will say, well, I love that bluebird, Dad. Let me go onto Google and see what type of bluebird, what species of bluebird that particular is. And you pull up bluebird on Google, and the first 20 images are of these fake AI bluebirds that don't exist in the real world. It's rather disheartening. And then, not to preach too much, but does the world need images of fake AI people where they got fake couples, they got fake girlfriends, they've got people, fake models and stuff like that? AI in photography, they do not mix. Recently, Leonard Peltier. So you had Sitting Bull was a rather controversial Native American. And then in the modern day, we had Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier spent 49 years in federal prison for the murder of 2 FBI agents. And I was, Deb Haaland, the Secretary of the Interior of the United States, called me on the phone and says, you have to do me a favor. And anytime the Secretary of Interior calls you on the phone and asks for a favor, the answer should probably be yes. And I said, what do you need? She says, you need to take a photograph of Leonard Peltier. He just got out of prison. President Biden had 6 minutes left on his presidency, and he he gave clemency to Leonard Peltier. And I went up and spent time with Leonard, and these are the 6, within 18 hours of making the plates up at Belcourt, the Library of Congress took one of the plates. So within a week, all 6 plates. One went to Leonard, it hangs on his wall, but all the other 6 plates went to different Library of Congress, Smithsonian. We got one to Heard Museum, which is our most famous Native American museum. And then number 6 there, you guys should like that. So this is Leonard after spending 49 years in prison. He called me on the phone 8 days after being released and says, I understand that you're going to be taking a photograph of me. And I told him I was going to do the best that I could. This one here, Doing Time, I took on March 26, 2025. The idea here was just Leonard looking out a window for 49 years. Clemency, I took on the same day. This went to the Library of Congress. I actually came up with this composition in a dream. So I had a month to think about taking a photograph of Leonard because it took us some time. He's still in prison actually at his house. And so we had to get approval from the Bureau of Prisons in the United States for me to even visit Mr. Peltier and take these pictures. But I had this dream about Leonard with this door ajar, with this black void behind him, and the jar is open, representing prison. And then in a last bit of inspiration, the ball and chain representing it was just a plastic ball and chain, but I broke it in front of Leonard. You have to understand, Leonard Peltier's been in prison for 49 years. I come with all my gear, I have this ball and chain, and I'm thinking, I can't let him see that right away. Like, I had it under a blanket, right? Like, that's the last thing you want to do. He's 49 years in prison. This photographer brings a ball and chain. So it was under a blanket. So I had made like 5 plates with Leonard. It was about 2 hours into our session. By that time, he had trusted me completely. And I said, Leonard, I want to show you something. And I brought this ball and chain out. And I said, I just think it just speaks volume. There's a narrative there about this ball and chain. And I broke it in front of him. And he said, I trust you, Shane. And then we made Clemency, which was probably the most famous of the pictures that we did. What's funny about this is the most difficult part of this shoot was the ball and chain was plastic. It was a windy day, so the ball and chain was moving around. So one of his grandchildren had to duct tape the ball and chain to the ground so that it didn't move. I love telling that story, but you don't see any of those things behind the scenes. Artistic freedom. Chad Nodland is my digital photographer for my studio. And he captured this picture to me and Leonard. I was standing above Leonard for this picture and always thinking about composition and stuff. So I'm standing, Leonard's in the chair that he's seated there, and I'm standing above him. And this voice in my head screams, you cannot be standing above Leonard Peltier. So I took a knee next to him, and he told me to put my fist up. And he says, we're brothers from today on. I've done some rather large collaborations throughout the years. No Vaccine for Death. 90 collaborators in 18 months based off The Triumph of Death by Peter Bruegel the Elder in 1562 painting. So we use this. I do these large collaborations. And here again, it goes into the translation, is that you have this scene, and it doesn't look like much, right, in the digital world. And then this is me actually shooting the scene. This is all bespoke costumes and hair and set design. And then it translates into this. So this was at the height of the pandemic, and it was called No Vaccine for Death. Essentially telling this story of anytime you see a skull, the skull is the virus, and the skull doesn't care if you're the king, the skull doesn't care if you're the warrior fighting it, the skull doesn't care if you're the old lady hiding underneath the table from it. It doesn't matter, it's going to equally come for you. The Capsizing of Humanity was another large collaboration that I did, inspired by the raft of the Medusa. That's what we did without any water, we did that. This is some plastic bags and I had a local artist do some paintings on some cardboard, and we erected our raft. And this is my son Grayson here, my brother Chad. Liberty trudges through injustice, based off liberty leading the people. We thought we would do the US flag. I was able to, this is like a $20,000 musket that was borrowed from the State Historical Society. These are all historical items taken off the shelf from the State Historical Society of North Dakota. That's the amount of trust that they have with me. And then I thought, well, they had the burning of the buildings, so I thought we would do the state capitol. And I posted this image, and right away people accused me of photoshopping in the state capitol. And what I did is had Paul Newt, the art teacher from the high school, paint the Capitol building. There's a young girl behind this cardboard cutout holding it up where everyone's seeing it. Maiden Pouring Milk of Vermeer, that you guys all know about the painting. Mr. Michael Pritchard is in. You want to raise your hand, Michael? He worked with the Royal Photographic Society, and this is William Morton, my favorite photographer. So, history repeating itself. We go from a painting in the 1600s to Morton in the early 1900s until to my setup. The hardest part was getting a chicken with feet on it. We had to have one butchered for my shoot. And this is Lainey Pope, my prop master, so she helps me with some of this creative stuff. When you guys get one of these prints at the end of our talk today, you guys will see a lot of Lainey's work there. We had to figure out this pouring of milk, and she used this plaster tube and stuff and made the milk. And there's my thank you to Mr. Pritchard. He took this into the Royal Photographic Society for me, the first one, my first plate with them. And here's all three side by side. Just something modern. I just did this 2 weeks ago. A living clay, a double exposure. I get this group together, about 30 of us, called the Photo Misfits, and we just create, and people fly in from Ohio and flew in from California and stuff to be part of this group. So my concept for this was to take this nude statue that had been out front of my studio for years and superimposing a young girl's head on top of it. So we had to cover her body, and then they were painting her neck, and I had to seamlessly match her neck up with the statue, and you're able to get the effect. Double exposures. I love working with double exposures. I put a man in an egg. Different things with movement. If you move in wet plate, us wet plate artists know if you move, our process is so slow. It's about a 10-second exposure in my studio to give you an idea. If you use your iPhone, it's 1/60th of a second, so it's 600 times longer to make a wet plate. So if you're in there and you're going like this, you're going to be blurry and not work at all for the photograph, but you can use that to your advantage. Fairy in a jar. This is all done in camera. So this was 12 years ago, 5,427 plates ago, on October 4th, 2012, my first wet plate of my brother Chad. You can about imagine standing in that dark room that I just created and everything that I had to get together, and that first image appeared. And then on October 4th, every year since, I take a photograph of my brother, so it's called My Brother Through the Years. So every year on October 4th, he comes in and we take another portrait of him. He had lost his wife to breast cancer during this time, so you can see some changes in him throughout the years, but it's just one of my little series. As of today, there's 104 museums around the world that are curating my work. And like we spoke earlier, 56 original plates are here at the Pitt Rivers Museum. My life's mission is to preserve as many plates as possible, not for me, but for my subjects. This is the State Historical Society of North Dakota, where they have over 1,200 of my original plates are archived there. I had done collaborating with the past here at Pitt's Rivers, a display. They made this bespoke display. Chris was kind enough with his team to make that, and they were on display here for about a year. One of the seminal moments of my career so far as a photographer is this portrait of Evander Holyfield. The Smithsonian Institute, and I had only been practicing wet plate for a little bit over 2 years, and Evander Holyfield came into my studio and sat down, and I was able to capture this portrait called The Real Deal. And the Smithsonian decided to take the plate, and they sent a climate-controlled van all the way from New York City to collect it. They came in, drove in, collected the plate, and then drove back to New York City with the plate. They didn't trust me to ship it, and it was a really big moment for me. I'm just going to go through some of my VIP people that I've taken photographs of. We already talked about Jordan Peterson, A Lifetime of Contemplation. Shailene Woodley, a very famous actress in Hollywood. I had been on a tour, not a tour, but me and my kids were at the State Historical Society, and she happened to just walk through the door, and I went up to her and asked her if she'd meet me at my studio in 2 hours so I could take her portrait, and she agreed. Billy Mills, 1964 gold medal winner in the 10,000 meter, came into my studio, Native American athlete. Greta Thunberg, Standing for Us All. This is at the Library of Congress. I shot this down at Standing Rock. So the people of Standing Rock, the elders and the children of Standing Rock, she was there to see them. You'll see that she's wearing a necklace. In fact, the necklace that last week I was told the necklace around her neck was made by one of my sitters that was in my studio. But they decided to give me 15 minutes with Greta Thunberg. So they just set aside 15 extra minutes that they could have had with her. And they said, no, Shane, you've done so much for this tribe and for the indigenous people down here. You can have Greta Thunberg for 15 minutes. So I only had her for 15 minutes in the field. And to be able to capture, we made 2 portraits that day. Deb Haaland, Congresswoman of New Mexico, and she became the Secretary of the Interior. That's also on her she's running for governor of New Mexico, and there's a poster with that portrait on there. She's the one that told me that I needed to take a photograph with Leonard Peltier. John Batiste, very famous very famous musician. He was in my studio 4 days before he won, was it 5 or 6 Grammys? It was fantastic having him in the studio. Josh Duhamel, the famous North Dakotan actor as well. And this is just a review of some of my other work that I do through every year. I just do a little bit of review and shows you some of the depth of my work and things that I work on. 2020. This is Laney Pope, my prop master. Like, for instance, the moon here, that Laney, she made this all by hand. She also did all of this draping and stuff to get the skull. I had to shoot down on these 2 girls that were sitting with their heads to make this skull appear. The armless woman, kind of like Venus, where we just, like a statue missing her arms. All we do is just paint her arms from here on down black, and they don't appear in the process. Captured the sun. My wife, Bonnie. And I just wanted to read this to you all so that something that I talk to my students about as well. The present is now. This is all we have. All we have is the present. Yesterday is but a low-resolution memory. Tomorrow cannot be predicted or expected. This present moment is where we live our lives 1 second at a time. What better way to immortalize our lives than with photography? It is the only proof or record we have of what happened in the past. The written and spoken words are fraught with mistakes, biases, misunderstandings, and imperfections. A perfect photographic record gives us the best chance of understanding history. In the end, it is all we have. I happen to think it's important to capture these moments as they occur. I want to prove that I existed with the works that I create. And the 1,000 Native American portraits is a book series. So every 250 portraits, I make a book. I don't have volume 1 up on the display because that's been sold out for about 6 years, but I have 42 copies of volume 2 yet, and I got about 300 copies of volume 3. And then when I reach 1,000 portraits, I will be able to make my 4th and final Native American book for this series and finish my promise to my Native American brothers and sisters. Calvin Grinnell, the Hidatsa elder, called me on the phone one day, and he said, I have your name. And it was a busy work day, and I wasn't understanding what he was saying, and I said, I don't understand. He says, I have your Native American name. He says, can we have a ceremony in your studio next week? I'd like to present it to you. So I said, that'd be great. And then he says, okay, we need to have Native American traditional food. You need to get some sponsors, some witnesses. You need to get gifts for those witnesses. And I got that all together. And he gave me the name Mishte Ekagoche in Hidatsa, which means shadow catcher. And I was always dedicated to this Native American series before that, but these people were coming in as complete strangers. And ever since I got my name, they come into my studio now as my brothers and sisters. And if they know that me as Shadowcatcher and they use my name when they come through the door, it's real. We don't really have an analog in our culture that they really mean brother. I'm really their brother. And it's a tradition that we just don't have other places. We belong to clubs and stuff like that. It's nothing like that. When these people come in and they know me as that, they know that Kelvin Grinnell gave me the name Shadowcatcher. I am their brother, and I just don't want to let these people down. Okay, so there are the plates here you guys can look at. I'm going to stick around. I'll answer questions or anything. And there's a varied amount of prints that you guys can select. And there's also cabinet cards, and there's some business cards there if you guys want as well. I really appreciate you listening to my little talk. So thank you so much.